Summer radio on the Jensen Show. Hear his music grow on the Jensen Show. Kid Jensen at drive time, Capital Radio.
Now, David Jensen is a broadcaster who presented his first radio show at the age of 14 and went on to build a career enthusing about music and sport and counting down charts. And even after all these years, he is, of course, Kid Jensen, everybody. David Jensen.
Yay! Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. How are you, kid?
Yeah, excellent. Looking forward to Christmas. Now I look forward to seeing the grandchildren.
It's hard to believe, here's me calling you kid, but it's hard to believe you've got grandchildren. So let's go to the book. This is a great book, by the way.
Thank you.
What was the very, very first show that you ever did, and where was it?
It was in Kelowna, which is a rural area in British Columbia. And in the interior, they have this place called Okanagan Valley. Yeah, I got a job on a local station playing classical music. The program was called Music for Dining, sort of like background music in a way.
So how did you end up being in Luxembourg? When did you leave Canada?
I left Canada in 1968, and I had been reading one of the industry kind of weekly Bibles in America is Billboard. And I read an interview that somebody from Billboard did with Paul Burnett, a colleague of yours and mine on Radio 1. It was working on radio then was just kind of a golden age, I think, in many respects.
Radio Luxembourg, we should explain, was an English service, came from Luxembourg in the middle of Europe there. I remember the phrase Jensen's Dimensions. That was your show, wasn't it?
Yes, I didn't say goodbye. At the end, I would say good love.
Oh, yeah, great. Very slightly kind of hippie era. Just talk to people about working in Luxembourg, because I was there for about 10 minutes, and I have an enduring memory of the croque monsieur machine.
You always mention that, don't you?
Yeah, well, I do, because that's all I had to eat. Did you used to use the croque monsieur machine quite a lot, kid?
Quite a lot, because it was the social centre of the Villa Lavini, and so we used to dine out on our croque monsieurs.
Yeah, we did.
No, it was a different sort of place in broadcasting to and from in the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, but it was kind of like an academy, and people kind of passing through. Yeah. Because of its stature in world broadcasting, because of the size of the enormity of the transmitters, I would just kind of think to myself, I'm blessed. I mean, seeing Jimi Hendrix playing on stage at a tiny cabaret club in Luxembourg, I'll always remember. The shows going out around Europe, I would do gigs. And I remember once interviewing the Eagles, and Joe Walsh came up to me backstage, and he said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, you used to be in the James Gang." And he said, "That's right, but I want you to do me a favor tonight." I said, "What's that?" Thinking it would be something musical. He had a shortwave listener card, which is a little bit in the kind of train spotting sort of
a kind of an anorak thing.
He asked, "Could you sign this?" And I signed it. Years and years later, when he was on stage in London at the Eagles concert, the first thing he said was, "You remember that card?" My God, Joe, I had to remember your band. Now you have to remember your card.
Then, of course, it was on to Radio 1. Here's you, I think, interviewing Susie.
Right, Susie and the Banshees and Fireworks, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to it in tomorrow's new Top 40. And Susie, who's with me tonight, the doctor in Sweden was quoted as saying that you'd have to give up singing for some months or at least change your singing style.
Right, yeah.
Now, I mean, did the doctor in England say anything about that suggestion that perhaps you should not, scream or something?
Well, I explained to him that I have a style that is recognisable as me.
Nighttime Radio 1 with David Jensen and John Peel.
Let me ask you about your friendship with Peely. What was the bond between you?
I think there was definitely a bond because it started off being the kind of like nighttime gang because, when you work by night, no matter what sort of work you're doing, shift work or something like that, it's just a different feel to the radio station and you get away with things and try things out knowing that management won't necessarily be listening.
The kid's got a bit of a joke for you here. This is Jimmy the Hoover.
Yeah, I reckon they're really going to clean up.
Hey, that's really great.
All right, if you think you're so clever, let's hear you do the chart.
David was first diagnosed, by the way, with Parkinson's disease a decade ago, but only spoke about it publicly in 2018. You're now, aren't you, an ambassador for Parkinson's UK?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, they've launched this new campaign, which they call Time for CAM. People who say they can't, but really they can. And there's a great ad going on TV which captures that. And it's very unlike any TV ad for any charity anywhere. It's just different because it has had for many years a stigma attached to it saying that if you're getting old, you'll probably get Parkinson's. And that's not necessarily the case.
No. Well, listen, good luck with the book. It's Kid Jensen for the record, which is a clever play on, on what he does.
Do you get it?
I get it. Just about. Is that copyright?
Yeah, of course.
Listen, wish you a Merry Christmas and
Thank
all
you.
of that.
You too.
Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Steve. And the
David
group.
Kid Jensen, everybody. You're kidding.
That's The Faces and Ooh La La. And that's chosen by David Jensen, who joins me on the line now. David's just chronicled his amazing career in radio in a book called For the Record. Good afternoon.
It's great talking with you. I was thinking it's been so long since we spoke together, and even longer than we were actually on radio and TV together.
That song by The Faces, I wish I knew then what I know now. Is there anything in your life that you thought, when you were younger, you wish you'd known something that you know now?
I wish I'd known how to play ice hockey better than I did, because being a hockey player on ice was what I wanted to do for a career. Unfortunately, I didn't make the cut, but I was determined enough to go to ice practice sessions at 5 o'clock in the morning to get ice time to try and pursue my dreams. And if I hadn't done that, I probably would have sent an audition tape to Rod Stewart so that I could be a member of the Faces, because they seem to always have a great time.
They did always have a great time. So how did you get into radio? Was that in Canada?
Yeah, with a bit of luck. It was a local station, which most of the outlets are in Canada, of course, and have been established as such. And they're either CBC, as in BBC, or commercial radio. And I started off doing a program called Music for Dining. And this program, with that cute little title, it was a program that was sponsored by a funeral company in a small town in British Columbia called Kelowna. And it was called Music for Dining because it was meant to be just that, playing bits of, what would you hear on Radio 3, some, nice quiet music, some contemplative stuff, and music for dining. So that was it.
Then you're over in the UK, and you joined Radio Luxembourg at a time when they wanted more people living out there doing live shows instead of all these pre-recorded shows that they used to put out. So was that a fluke, getting that job, or how did that come about?
Well, I did a program which I called Dimensions, and it was meant to be, and indeed it was kind of another type of music that was being played on the air, and we weren't, for example, concentrating on commercial as such as Bay City Rollers sort of things. It was more like Wishbone Ash or Status Quo or some of those other great bands that I've played forever back in the day. And it was an opportunity I was given a chance to do, because the program director then was Tony MacArthur, and I was sent to Paris to meet the great and the good of the international sort of radio convention in Paris, based on the experience of people playing album tracks rather than just singles. And I met a guy called Tom Donahue, who was there, and he was kind of the father of FM radio. And it was just really interesting meeting these guys, and especially him, because he was such a good guy, and he was able to spend some time with me talking about radio here, there, and everywhere. And so that was good. So I thought to myself, right, I've just about made it, and off I went.
Now, one record you played a lot there, you made a prediction. This guy is going to be a big star and the band are going to have huge success. And you were talking of Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy. And I remember listening to you on Luxembourg and you playing Whiskey in the Jar. You really went for it in getting behind that record, didn't you?
Yeah, I was lucky that others didn't kind of pick up on it, but I just saw it as something that was commercially available, clearly accessible, and to pick an old 16th century Irish folk song and turn it into this international hit that lasted running the charts for weeks and weeks and weeks was no mean feat for the boys, and they were always friendly, always happy to come to Luxembourg, and I met them a few times in Dublin, because there was an emerging number of Irish musicians and bands at the time. But Phil was particularly notable because he was a very charismatic guy on stage. He used to carry around his bass guitar and used to plug in at restaurants and just sort of like be practicing. So we'd be sitting in a cafe in Luxembourg and he'd suddenly bring this guitar out and practice. So they were very good fun.
Thin Lizzy and Whiskey in the Jar. The success of that record owes a lot to David Jensen, who's on the line now and has written a book called For the Record. Now, you mentioned Paul Burnett being out at Radio Luxembourg in those days.
Yeah.
It was Paul who gave you the nickname Kid, wasn't it?
That's right. The reason anybody was looking for another name for me was that we had a, sadly now passed on, Dave Christian, and there was too many Davids for people to concentrate on. So that was a ridiculous situation. But he actually gave me the name, which in later years people would say, don't call him that because he gets annoyed by it. But I've never been annoyed by that. I think it's a great name. You know, it just never really bothered me. People say he's pretending to be. I've never pretended to be. I mean, here I am at the jolly old age of 17, and
Now, one of the things that you did during your radio career was get a really nice little job. I mean, we go out to interview people. We go to sometimes interesting places to interview people. But what about actually travelling on the private plane, with the Rolling Stones?
Now, that was great. That was in 1970. Was it 372? I can't remember. I should remember the date because it was such a memorable time to be amongst their entourage. And Mick Jagger was great. He was very welcoming, and all the Stones at that time, they were promoting their Exile on Main Street album in America. And I joined them in Pittsburgh, went to Philadelphia, then a couple of nights in New York, and it was, fantastic. Bill Wyman gave me a pass, which meant that I could go anywhere, everywhere with the Rolling Stones. And he said, why don't you come on stage when I come on and stand next to me? And I thought, well, apart from looking like a spare part, I want to do it because it sounded so exciting. So it was, so there I was. And it was. Somebody made a documentary on that particular tour with the Rolling Stones, but there's an embargo apparently that prohibits people from finding out much about it. But it was a pretty exciting time, and what my outstanding memory of being with the Stones was being in Pittsburgh, where it was wintry conditions at the time, and the plane engines were frozen up. So while we had to wait, we disembarked. And one of the band members had a football. So they set up this football game on the tarmac at Pittsburgh Airport, including yours truly. And it was, I thought to myself, gosh, the gang back home could see me now.
David Jensen is on the line here on Sounds of the 70s. And you picked a Four Tops song. Which one?
Well, it's really interesting picking a band like the Four Tops because there's so many songs, and Motown had that distinctive sound of their own, making records. But there's something about their story that fascinates me, and I feel, warm towards their lead singer, Levi Stubbs, but this was a time when Berry Gordy, the Motown maestro, started calling bands like Diana Ross and the Supremes, not just the Supremes anymore, Diana Ross and the Supremes, and there were a couple of bands like that, and he said to Levi Stubbs, I'd like you to be Levi Stubbs and the Four Tops. And Levi was reluctant to do that. And he spoke to the band members, and they were all behind Levi, because Levi said, we've been in this industry as a bunch of guys, and we've seen, from the very roots, the very beginning, paying our dues here and there and everywhere and doing this. And it was such a shame, he said, that people just want to hear Levi Stubbs. He said, I want them to hear the Four Tops. So that was fantastic. And this particular period was from their. See, a lot of bands went through this period, notably Marvin Gaye and What's Going On. But it's it reflects a kind of a more, how would you say that, thoughtful, contemplative way of going about the Four Tops music. It's different, and it came out as a double A side. In fact, the B side was just a remaking of the first side, but it was 12 minutes rather than 6 minutes. But it's a really, really nice song.
The Four Tops and Still Waters. I think it was thanks to the likes of Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye who persuaded Motown Records to allow artists a bit more say in the music. And good for Levi Stubbs not wanting to change the name, because really it would have been Levi Stubbs and the Three Tops, which doesn't sound that good at all. Well, listen, congratulations on doing the book.
Thank you very much, Johnny.
I mean, it's kind of good fun promoting a book, isn't it?
It is good fun. And I make that work with the ambassadorial stuff I do for Parkinson's UK. And so I hope you don't mind me getting a plug in for them, but they've helped me a lot, as they have helped a lot of people a lot. And it's Parkinson's UK is the email address.
Okay. And so have you, of course. I mean, I know you had conflicting advice. Some advice said, if you realise you've got Parkinson's disease, don't tell anyone.
And other,
right. Yeah, and other. I mean, you can't just keep something like that to yourself, can you?
Well, no. I mean, I wanted people to know about it. I wanted my friends to know about it, and he said when I asked him, I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I said my wife." He said, "Yes, your wife." He said, "Did you have children?" I said, "Yes." He said, "The children too." He said, "I just think," and I said, "Why?" Because he said, "I think that you seem to get tired of people asking you how you are all the time," and I said, by complete opposite, I feel that very warm inside that people would think enough of asking me how I was doing. So I took offense in that and went to another neurosurgeon. But anyway, that's gone now. But it's one of those very slow diseases. It moves extremely slowly, which is good because the Earth is turning, of course, but it's maybe not at the speed that the music business does. But it's good. It's good to have friends at times like this because they really make yourself. I mean, I got a call out of the blue from Jules Holland, and we had such a great chat on the phone, and it was great. I'd forgotten that I even had Parkinson's. That's the key to not remind yourself, because it would be every day, or like any disease, and you're not unfamiliar with living and being in a jolly industry when your days could be numbered.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely to have somebody who can sort of, take away thinking about it for a while.
Thank you.
And you're certainly dealing with it very well, and I wish you all the best for the.
That's very kind, John.
May it be very slow, David.
Yeah. Is the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Slow.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time this afternoon, and all the best to you.
That's very kind, Johnny, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, David.